Please! Mr. Easton, follow the policy! Follow the policy!
The 80s brought us Freddy and Jason. The 90s had Ghostface and Chucky. But what about the 2000s? That's when horror got a whole new face. Jigsaw. In 2004, Saw introduced us to Tobin Bell's Jigsaw, who cut out his own spot in horror history. Pun intended. His mind-bending, stomach-turning traps pushed his victims to the limit, forcing them to decide just how badly they wanted to stay alive. From the start of Saw 10, John Kramer, our resident maniacal mastermind, makes his twisted life coach philosophy clear, saying he's all about helping people enact positive change. Sure, if you call getting tortured self-improvement, the courts might have a different opinion. But Jigsaw isn't your usual serial killer. He doesn't kill directly. Instead, he sets up horrifying tests that force his victims to make brutal choices, face their worst sins, or endure pain like they've never imagined. Jigsaw's games rob his victims of all sorts of things: limbs, organs, dignity, you name it. But he keeps his hands clean, letting them do the dirty work themselves through his DIY torture devices. It's all about giving them the choice, as he puts it, even if that choice is between agonizing survival and a quick death. In this video, we're diving into 15 of the most terrifying, gruesome traps in the Saw series. Warning, if you've got a weak stomach, this might not be for you. And yeah, spoilers start in 3, 2, 1. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Reverse Bear Trap, Saw, Saw 6, and Saw 3D. With a design that's as iconic as it is merciless, the Reverse Bear Trap is a brutal piece of work that really nails what Saw is all about. It's just as iconic to the franchise as Hannibal Lecter's mask is to Silence of the Lamb. The Reverse Bear Trap, a horrifying device, has a rusty helmet and a mouth shredder that has fans wriggling in their seats but keeps them hooked. So it all started with Amanda, the drug addict, right? Although she went from being a victim to an accomplice later, she had to taste the wrath of the Reverse Bear Trap. The horrific device is first seen strapped under her jaw. The only way she can escape it is if she finds the key in time to unlock it, or it will tear her face open. And the only way to get the key is she has to dig through the stomach of her still-alive dealer. There's really no clean way out of this situation. Salvation at a terrible cost. That's the warped logic of Jigsaw. And it's not just a one-time thing. This fan-favorite trap makes an appearance in 3 movies. In Saw 6, psychotic detective Mark Hoffman ends up in the bear trap because of Jill, John's wife. Even though he manages to dodge death by slamming his mouthpiece against a grated door to stop it from fully triggering, it still gives him a nasty scar. Hoffman, ready for some payback in Saw 3D, straps Jill into the same device. This time, things didn't go her way. The last shot of her face torn wide open is definitely one of the most unsettling images in Saw history. There's something about the Reverse Bear Trap's ticking timer that isn't matched by anything else in the series. That feeling of pure panic. It's classic Jigsaw, a harmless machine that looks straightforward, but will slaughter you in the blink of an eye if you don't move quickly enough. Sure, it is escapable, I suppose, only if you can tune out the panic and really focus. With my luck, I'd likely be digging around in someone's bladder in the wrong spot while the clock's ticking away before getting my face ripped open. But that's really what gives the Reverse Bear Trap its legendary status. Its high stakes, straightforward mechanics, and the sheer fright it brings. Beauty in simplicity, or should I say, terror in simplicity. Needle Pit, Saw 2. For this trap, Kramer puts a murderous twist on the classic metaphor of finding a needle in a haystack. Jigsaw takes things to the next level by forcing his drug-addicted victims to rummage through a pit of used syringes to find a key that might just save them from a room slowly filling with deadly nerve gas. And not 1,000 or 2,000 syringes. Think 120,000 syringes. At least that's the official count. Who's the poor soul stuck with this tough job? Angry for no reason drug dealer Xavier Chavez. Although the trap was meant for Chavez, he pushes recovering addict Amanda into the pit instead, thinking, why not? She was a drug addict and already familiar with needles. Makes sense, right? Not really. All he really cared about was making sure he survived. Poor Amanda, how does she always find herself in these situations? First, the bear trap, now this. My heart goes out to her. This death trap from Jigsaw might not be lethal like the others, but that doesn't make it any less terrifying. Amanda squirms for 2 straight minutes that feel like forever, surrounded by syringes poking into her arms, legs, and back, all while she searches through the pit for the key. It's one of Jigsaw's easier setups, but it's definitely unsettling in its own way. No ticking clock, no tough choices to make, just a dirty hunt for a key lost in a mountain of bloody needles. As a germaphobe, I'd rather be chained up to a table saw any day. Just saying. Amanda finally discovers the key, which just goes to show her survival instincts. All her pain would have been justified, only if not for Xavier's dumbass and his butterfingers, which would have opened the lock in time. What a sad show. In this trap, all you need is to keep your eyes open and brace yourself for a ton of pokes. Yeah, way more than just a few. If needles make you squeamish, this scene is rough to sit through. Bathroom trap, Saw. You really can't go wrong with a classic, and in the Saw franchise, the famous bathroom trap is where it all started and gave the series its name. This time, instead of Jigsaw's usual mechanical traps, we've got a scenario that's all about the choices people make when their lives are at stake. Dr. Lawrence Gordon, who's been unfaithful to his wife, and Adam Stanheit, a freelance photographer who profits from spying on folks like Gordon, find themselves trapped in a disgusting, grimy bathroom. Waking up to a total nightmare, they find themselves chained by their ankles to metal pipes on opposite sides of the room. The only way out? Either they have to kill each other or saw through their own limbs. Talk about a rough morning. Just when you thought being stuck in that awful bathroom was the worst of it, surprise! Jigsaw himself lies dead in a pool of blood right there on the floor the whole time. Gordon figures out that Jigsaw didn't want them to cut through the chains. He wanted them to cut through their feet. And of course, there's a ticking clock. If Gordon doesn't kill Adam by 6 a.m., his family gets killed, or Adam has to escape by then somehow. Gordon and Adam try to outsmart Jigsaw by playing dead, but nope, that plan is a no-go. The shackles are rigged as shock collars to keep them alert and in line. There's also a hidden cell phone in the room somewhere, but it just gets calls, and only from the guy who's got Gordon's family held hostage. So this trap isn't just about physical violence, it really pushes both guys to their breaking point. During the whole situation, some pretty dark options come up. A toxic cigarette, a gun for killing, and that key for Adam, without even knowing, kicked down the drain right at the beginning. Sure, their reasons for being in the crosshairs might seem less serious than Jigsaw's other victims, but the way this trap unfolds, pure cinematic gold. Flawless and precise, just how we like it. So in the end, Gordon ends up sawing off his foot to escape and goes out to find help, while Adam believes he's actually taken down Jigsaw. But then we get hit with the most surprising reveal of all. John Kramer, the real Jigsaw, suddenly stands up in the middle of the room, showing that he's been alive and watching everything happen. I must say, he's really committed to what he does, isn't he? Shotgun Carousel, Saw 6. There are 6 unfortunate employees working under William Easton, the manager of Umbrella Health Insurance. They end up in a pretty creepy situation, all strapped to a merry-go-round that's got Jigsaw's iconic spirals painted on it, all responsible for denying health insurance claims according to company policy. So here they are, spinning around and around, while a shotgun mounted on a machine is ready to take them out one by one. Easton's got one shot at survival, but boy, it's gonna sting. Every time he tries to save one of them, he has to push his hand into a cage that drives a rusty bolt right through his palm. But the worst part is, he can only save 2 out of the 6, which makes his employees beg and negotiate for their lives while they watch the shotgun slowly point at their heads. All of a sudden, they find themselves in a position where they're the ones begging, just like those whose lives they've impacted. But can you really talk your way out of a Jigsaw trap? Really? Here's hoping your boss really likes you. Well, yes and no. In a surprising turn of events, Two employees, Emily and Shelby, find a way to survive by tugging at Easton's emotions, bringing up their kids and sick parents to gain some sympathy. The others, unfortunately, end up with huge holes in their chests. Feels like a bizarre game of Russian roulette, except it's the victims who rotate instead of bullets. The fact each victim glances right at Easton, who's got their future in his hands just before they're shot at, makes it even more disturbing. This trap has this eerie carnival feel that really amps up the horror. It's kind of like a messed up version of the trolley problem. Whatever Easton chooses, people are going to die, and he'll have to live with that burden. In the corporate scene, life and death choices are made daily, and to the higher-ups, you're either a valuable asset or just someone they can let go. Every employee knows their turn is coming up, and it's a terrifying realization. Venus Flytrap, Saw 2, Saw 3, and Saw 3D. After the nail-biting first Saw film, Saw 2 really had to kick things off with a bang to let fans know that the terror was only going to get worse. So let's talk about the Venus Flytrap, or as some like to call it, the Death Mask. In a movie full of intense, horrific traps, this one was the most gory. So who was the poor victim? Michael Marks, a police informant often seen as someone who snitches and lends a hand to corrupt cops for a bit of extra cash. Jigsaw didn't just set up a regular trap for Michael. Nuh-uh. This one had a secret twist. All he had to do was to extract a key. Obviously, it's never that simple. Jigsaw had the key implanted behind Michael's eye, and the one way out for Michael was to grab a tiny scalpel and carefully dig out the eye before he ran out of time. Later, in Saw 3D, we learned that Dr. Gordon had performed the surgery. Yes, Dr. Gordon from the bathroom trap, who Jigsaw chained to a pipe in a dirty bathroom, and he had to saw off his limb to escape. Well, apparently, Gordon was grateful to Jigsaw for helping him repair his relationship with his family. Sure. Meanwhile, Michael's head was trapped in this gnarly Venus flytrap mask, a spiky metal contraption, like a mini Iron Maiden. Once the timer hit 0, the mask would snap shut, crushing his skull in pure medieval horror style. This wasn't some man in the iron mask situation. Mess up, and he'd end up looking like a twisted version of Hellraiser. Michael tried as hard as he could to go through with it, scalpel shaking in his hand, but he just couldn't do it. When time ran out, the trap snapped shut, bringing a fast but brutal end. Honestly, given his options, it was probably quicker than the alternative of tearing into his own face. The Angel Wings Trap, Saw 3. This trap is more hellish than heavenly, guys. Saw 3 features Amanda Young again, the drug addict who made it through her own trap in the first movie and became Jigsaw's devoted apprentice. In Saw 3, Amanda's first targets were police officers, and she held them responsible for her wrongful incarceration. Out of some sick desire for revenge, she tested detectives Allison Carey and Eric Matthews. And with it came Amanda's most brutal creation, the Angel Trap. Detective Carey is all tied up in a leather harness, with big metal brackets digging into her ribcage. And the only way she can escape is to grab a key from the bottom of a jar filled with acid before it gets dissolved, and then use it to unlock the padlock that holds the harness. If she doesn't succeed, the brackets will burst open her chest, ripping her ribcage apart, kind of like a modern twist on the Nordic Blood Eagle torture method. Carey, who knows all about Jigsaw's traps, gets the key just in time to save her hand from getting totally burned. But her win didn't last long. The key isn't working. Amanda has set up a trap that's impossible to escape from. Poor Carey just can't catch a break, can she? It feels like no matter what she tries, things just aren't going her way. When the timer hits 0, the harness bursts open dramatically, almost like angel wings, tearing her ribcage apart. Carey, who followed all the rules but yet came up short, meets a terrible and merciless end. I don't usually like inescapable traps, but this one is really terrifying. It's pretty horrific to think about having to stick your hand in acid, only to realize that the key didn't even matter. Kelly hangs there, her ribcage caught, and it feels like there's no way out. Those last moments? Pure horror. Horsepower Trap, Saw 3D. Like something you'd see in a crazy game of mousetrap, this trap is fast-paced and high stakes. Called the horsepower trap, it catches Evan and his gang, who are the targets because of their racial abuse and assaults on people. Evan is stuck in the driver's seat, and the fate of his friends is hanging by a thread. No kidding. All Evan has to do is just pull the lever in front of him to stop the car and keep everyone safe. But it might not be as easy as it sounds, because his back is glued to the seat, and with just 30 seconds left on the clock, he has to pull himself free if he wants to grab that lever. Underneath the car, his girlfriend Kara is chained right by the wheels. Evan's buddy Dan has his arms and lower jaw chained to the back seat of the car. At the same time, Jake is pinned to the garage door just where the car is barreling at. If Evan doesn't pull the lever in time, the jacks are going to collapse, setting off a gruesome chain reaction. With time ticking away, Evan struggled against the strong glue, tearing at his own skin in a desperate attempt to grab the lever. Even with all his trying, he just can't get there in time. The jacks come down and the car falls, crushing Kara under the wheels. The vehicle suddenly lunges ahead, tearing Dan's arms and jaw right off his body. The car crashes into Jake, taking him and the garage door down in one powerful hit. In the end, Evan gets thrown out through the windshield when the car crashes, putting an end to the horrific trap in a bloodbath. The horsepower trap is really clever in how it's designed, using a car in all sorts of deadly ways, from crushing to launching its victim. If Evan had considered using his legs to reach the lever, he might have had a shot, but let's be honest. We all know Jigsaw's victims typically aren't really that smart. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been in the trap to begin with. 10 pints of sacrifice, Saw 5. So, with about 10 pints of blood in our bodies, what really goes down when you have to give up or, say, brutally sacrifice a significant amount of it just to survive? That's really the heart of this trap in Saw 5, one of the last tests in the Fatal 5 trial. This game really drives home Jigsaw's famous question from the first movie: how much blood will you shed to survive? And in a not-so-subtle way. So in 10 pints of sacrifice, 5 strangers, each playing a part in a building fire, are forced to play a terrifying walkthrough game. For this final test, meant for 5 people, you need to give up 10 pints of blood to unlock the door and escape. However, only 2 people, Britt and Malik, make it this far, and they realize that they could have tackled the earlier tests together instead of fighting for survival. Now, with their allies gone, they have to figure out how to meet that 10-pint requirement just between the 2 of them. And if not, there's always a nail bomb that could explode and kill them. The terrifying trap requires Britt and Malik to put their hands into a huge box with spinning saw blades, pushing their arms in until the blood meter is completely full. As they push their hands deeper into the saws, they see in horror as their own flesh is ripped apart. The victim is forced to sit in excruciating pain and watch their hand being shredded by a saw blade. Fine, Jigsaw, you got this one. Nobody can leave this trap unscathed. One of the most intense moments shows Malik's hand split right down the middle, creating a twisted V shape, a clever reference to Saw 5 itself, with 5 being written as V. It's a tough situation, and there's really no simple solution here. The victims have to go through the pain, or they won't make it. With an unsettling amount of blood and gore that's pretty tough to handle, this test is definitely one of the most brutal challenges in the series. This trap even inspired the bucket trap in 2017's Jigsaw. Torture Rack, Saw 3. In Saw 3, forgiveness really comes into play, particularly with the rack trap. Jeff Denlin, who tragically lost his son due to a drunk driver named Timothy Young, has been grappling with vengeful thoughts. Timothy's anger just keeps growing because of the tragedy. The only witness decided not to testify, and Judge Halden ended up giving Timothy only 6 months in prison. Jigsaw takes this chance to really test Jeff's ability to forgive. He traps Timothy in a horrible crucifix-style trap and pushes Jeff to face his anger. Timothy's arms and legs are pinned down, and the way the trap is set up gradually twists each limb and, in the end, his neck. The only option for Jeff to save Timothy, a man he hates, is to get a key from a glass case that's set up with a shotgun. At first, Jeff really wants to see Timothy suffer, but Halden being there brings him back to his senses. Jeff suddenly realizes he needs to save Timothy. Even though he succeeds in retrieving the key, by that point, the shotgun had already taken out Halden, and Timothy's time has run out. As Jeff hurries over, he can't help but feel a wave of dread wash over him. He sees the trap mercilessly twist Timothy's neck, leaving him with a horribly rotated head. Jeff is crushed by the experience, and he falls to his knees as he comes to terms with how pointless his revenge truly is. This is one of Jigsaw's favorite traps, and it's pretty clear why. The trap is harsh, snapping its victims' limbs one by one, tearing their muscles, bones, and flesh to shreds. Inspired by a real medieval torture tool, the slow, methodical twists make every snap and crunch feel all too real, creating an atmosphere that's just too realistic and scarring. Close-ups show bones sticking out and flesh all twisted up, a horrific sight that might make you lose your appetite. The horror gets even worse with the constant noise of the machine, which is only sometimes interrupted by the victim's painful screams. It just keeps going, one twist at a time, to a point where you can hardly take it. And then, right when you think it's about to end, there comes a neck twist that might make anyone want to look away. Knife chair, Saw 4. Picture this. You accidentally nick yourself while cooking, and now imagine that feeling, but it's all over your body, creeping in slowly and painfully. That's what Jigsaw's very first trap is all about, fueled by revenge. The target this time is Cecil, a drug addict who broke into the clinic that Jigsaw's pregnant wife Jill was running. This incident caused Jigsaw's pregnant wife Jill to suffer a heartbreaking miscarriage. John Kramer's life was completely turned upside down by this loss, which led him to become Jigsaw. In this early creation of John, we see Cecil tied to a rough wooden chair with blades poking into his hands. The only way he can escape is to push his face through a headpiece made of knives, which would obviously leave him with deep, lasting scars. Jigsaw's objective here is to show everyone how ugly Cecil really is on the inside. It's kind of poetic in a harsh way, and shows that Jigsaw considered his work from the beginning as more than just torture. He saw it as a form of justice, no matter how twisted that idea of justice was. While the setup of the knife chair is pretty straightforward, it has its flaws. Despite its sharp edge, the chair is a bit wobbly. Cecil, in a fit of pain, thrashes around so much that he breaks free without even really trying to push his face through the blades, and the chair ends up collapsing. Even though he technically manages to get out of the test without actually completing it, instead of just enjoying his lucky escape, Cecil goes straight for Jigsaw, all fired up, intent on exacting revenge. Jigsaw dodges, while Cecil ends up tripping right into a bed of barbed wire, leading to a pretty painful and undignified finish for him. Watching this trap is really painful, both in the idea behind it and how it's carried out. It's pretty terrifying to think about having to scar your face with knives, but there's something both terrifying and fascinating about seeing Jigsaw in its most unfiltered form. Even though it's not his most intricate creation, this trap was the beginning of his journey into becoming the careful, merciless game master that we eventually came to dread. Razor Wire Maze, Saw and Saw 5. The Razor Wire Maze from the first Saw movie really knows how to play on our primary fears. Feeling all alone and utterly powerless. Jigsaw's decision to test someone who's suffering from depression really makes you think about whether your own struggles could get you into trouble, right? Poor Paul Leahy learns a cruel lesson from Jigsaw after he tries to take his own life. And what's Jigsaw's solution all about? A labyrinth of sharp razor wire. Paul wakes up totally naked in a cramped tunnel, with razor wire all around, just waiting to cut him at any moment. All he needs to do is get through the maze in less than 2 hours, or he'll be trapped in the maze indefinitely. But in order to stay alive, he must crawl through this brutal obstacle course, fully aware that every inch he moves will tear at his skin. Paul attempts to escape, but it feels like an impossible task. By the end, he's in such rough shape that his stomach acid spills out on the floor. It's death by 1,000 cuts, literally. Public Execution Trap, Saw 3D. Saw 3D isn't really about any heavy themes, but right from the start, it makes one thing clear. The traps have leveled up into a total spectacle. Jigsaw used to keep his twisted games a secret, say in a bathroom or a pit, but now he's bringing them out into the open for everyone to see. This opening trap happens to be in the broad light of day, right in front of an intrigued crowd. Jigsaw sure is letting loose with his savage game. scene. Two guys, Brad and Ryan, are tied up on a workshop table right in the shop window, and there are these spinning saw blades hovering dangerously close to their chests. Dina, a woman they both dated, completely oblivious to the fact that she was pitting them against one another, hangs above them. A third saw, sitting below her, swings on a bending arm, leaving Brad and Ryan to make a brutal decision. They can either turn on each other to save her, or team up and let the central saw do its thing, which will obviously kill poor Dina. At first, Brad and Ryan, in the heat of the moment, are all set to go after each other for her. Unfortunately, as the trap progresses, they learn the hard way that Dina isn't really into either of them, so they just decide to cut their losses and turn the blade on her instead. As Dina gets sawed in half, the crowd watches in disbelief, but obviously taking pictures. This is about as bad as public humiliation gets. What really makes this trap unsettling is seeing the onlookers just standing there, completely frozen and unable to help. In other words, it's proof that Jigsaw can do anything and is completely unhinged. The Mausoleum trap, Saw 4. The Saw 4 trap put its own little spin on see no evil, speak no evil, with cruelty and complexity turned up all the way. Trevor and Art find themselves shackled in a mausoleum. Either they can help each other and escape, or fight it out for their survival. You would say by Jigsaw's standard that that's not too bad. Well, Trevor can't see as his eyes are sewn shut, while Art can't speak because his mouth is sewn shut. Can you believe it? These two are shackled together by the neck and chained to a winch while their chains slowly pull them toward a really painful death. To make matters worse, Trevor ends up with a bunch of deadly tools while Art spots the key to their escape just hanging from Trevor's collar. But panic has already set in. Blind and oblivious, Trevor accidentally hits the winch and activates it, and it starts pulling the gentleman closer. In a moment of desperation, Art kills Trevor and manages to free himself just in the nick of time. I would say poor Trevor really didn't have a shot from the very beginning. He was blind and totally confused and had no idea how to get out of it. After escaping the trap, Art tears the stitches from his mouth and lets out a scream of agony. What? If he could do that, he should probably have done that right in the beginning. Then maybe Trevor would have made it out too. Well, we'll never know. The trap only highlights how ruthless Jigsaw can be, transforming a complicated setup into a full-on bloodbath. It's not the most brutal trap, but it's certainly one of the most excruciating to see play out. It's really puzzling why Trevor and Art are stuck together like this. There's no clear rhyme or reason behind it. Subway trap, Spiral. Spiral from the Book of Saw is something unique that came out of the Saw universe, trying to give the series a fresh start in 2021 with big names like Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson attached to it. The film had its flaws, no doubt, but it definitely nailed the traps, really capturing that gritty, rough vibe the early Saw movies were known for. Limbs, head, ribs, the early Saw had done it all. But for the first time ever in the franchise, Spiral focused on a trap that had never been messed with: the human tongue. The film begins with Marv Boz Boswick, a dirty cop, hanging out in a subway tunnel. No, literally hanging in a subway tunnel, for his tongue is actually bolted into a metal device. Unlike most Saw victims, who can thrash around or scream their hearts out, Boz is really in a tough spot. He's balanced unsteadily on a shaky wooden stool with his hands tied behind his back, kind of like a convicted man waiting at the gallows. Boz now has to give up his tongue, the very tongue with which he kept lying on the stand, putting innocent folks behind bars. It's cruel, but poetic in its own way. To make it out alive, he must pull his tongue right out of his own mouth. But if he hesitates too long to decide, a subway train will run him over. Stay still and face the train, or move and lose your tongue. Boz has a simple but terrifying option. The fear of losing one's own tongue is universal, and seeing it play out on screen is gross and cool. It balances the doable with the painful. However, heads up, the close-up shots of Boz's tongue stuck are very disturbing. Pig Vat Trap, Saw 3. The Saw traps are well known for all the blood, the lost limbs, and the intense physical and psychological pain they cause. But Saw 3 really surprises you with the Pig Vat Trap, which is definitely one of the most unforgettable and horrifying traps in the franchise, in its own twisted way. This trap isn't really about hurting the victim physically. Rather, it's more of an emotional test. meant to push him to make a different sort of sacrifice. This trap, in a way, revolves around Jeff, the father whom we've already met in the torture rack, where he tries to save Timothy and Halden, but ultimately fails in doing so. The trap's victim is Judge Halden, who gave a light sentence to the drunk driver who took Jeff's son's life, a decision that Jeff just can't seem to forgive. The judge is shackled at the bottom of this huge vat, and in classic Jigsaw style, it's slowly filling up with liquefied pig carcasses. Jeff is tasked to burn a few of his son's cherished belongings in an incinerator to get the key that might save the judge from drowning in a pit of pig goo. While it's really tough to ask a grieving father to part with his child's things, this emotional burden feels a bit easier when you think about the incredibly painful and torturous self-sacrifices Jigsaw's victims are asked to make. However, drowning in pig goo sounds like a pretty gross way to go. Seeing the pig juice fill the tank and slowly make its way into the judge's mouth is just a total nightmare. Icky, disgusting, and yet you can't help but keep watching. The scene is gross and even hilarious how slow Jeff is in deciding to burn the objects, looking all confused about what to do, while the judge is over there gagging on pig guts. A bit of pig slime never hurts anyone. Marvelous verdict. In Jigsaw's world, every trap is a twisted, brutal challenge that pushes his victims to face their darkest fear. These aren't just random torture devices, they're part of his warped philosophy about survival and self-reflection. After seeing these, you have to admit, real-life problems don't seem so bad. So, which trap freaked you out the most? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into horror.